your voice in the world.
This is the English service of Radio Algeria International. It's time for the news.
Algerian diplomacy chief Ahmed Attaf has arrived in Singapore for an official visit to this friendly country following instruction of the President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune. And President Abdelmajid Tebboune has handed over the Football Cup trophy to the captain of USMA club, Saadi Radwani, after the final victory over CRB. As both UNRWA and the World Food Programme called for an access to humanitarian aid and for lifting of the Israeli blockade on Gaza, the Israeli occupation army pursued its airstrikes on the territory, killing and wounding several Palestinians. And those were the major developments. Now the full news edition. I'm Asya Bakar. Good afternoon. The President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, has handed over the Football Cup trophy to the captain of USMA Alger club, Saadi Radwani, after the final victory over CRB Belouizdad, 2-0 at the Nelson Mandela Stadium in Algiers. The President of the Republic also handed over medals of honor to the players and technical and administrative staff to the two finalist clubs, in addition to granting awards to referees of the match or football game and signing footballs. USMA Alger won the 58th edition of the Algerian Cup by beating CRB of Belouizdad with 2 goals scored by Ben Ayed at the 9th minute and Khaldi at the 13th minute. You're still listening to Radio Algeria International, and the President of the Republic, Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces and Minister of National Defense, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, has presided over festivities marking the 63rd anniversary of independence and the recovery of national sovereignty. A ceremony held at the National Army Club in Algiers in honor of senior army officers, both active and retired, was held in the presence of senior state officials. Mr. Al-Sharfi has the details.
The President of the Republic was welcomed by the Deputy Minister to the Minister of National Defense and Chief of Staff of the People's National Army. The ceremony, which is part of the traditions of the People's National Army, aimed at commemorating the key dates of our religious history and paying tribute to our valiant martyrs, was attended by the speakers of the Council of the Nation and of the People's National Assembly, the Prime Minister, the President of the Constitutional Court, the Chief of Staff and the Secretary General of the Presidency and the members of the government, and advisors to the President of the Republic, as well as the representatives of several security forces bodies.
Minister of State, Minister of Foreign Affairs, National Committee Abroad and African Affairs, Ahmed Attaf, has arrived in Singapore for an official visit to this friendly country following instruction of the President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune. The visit aims to strengthen the cooperation and partnership relations between Algeria and Singapore and to give them a new impetus, particularly in the economic and technological fields. The Algerian diplomacy chief, Ahmed Attaf, will hold a working session with his Singaporean counterpart, Vivian Balakrishnan, and will also hold bilateral meetings with senior officials in the Republic of Singapore. On the occasion of the celebration of the 63rd anniversary of Independence Day and the recovery of national sovereignty, the representative of the Polisario Front to the UN, Sidi Muhammad Ammar, has stressed that Algeria is aware and feels the pain of other peoples and takes upon itself the responsibility of defending these peoples and their rights to freedom and independence. In an interview granted to Radio Algeria International, Sidi Muhammad Ammar highlighted Algeria's attachment to just causes, foremost the Palestinian cause and the Sahrawi issue, and their right to freedom and independence.
Algeria, which led a bitter struggle against colonialism, is aware and feels the pain of other peoples, and therefore takes upon itself the responsibility of defending these peoples and their rights to freedom and independence. This was said in 1965. In September 2023, the Algerian President, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, confirmed before the United Nations General Assembly that Algeria, which was preparing at the time to take a seat at the Security Council would join the Security Council while carrying the pains of African and Arab peoples, and would continue to defend just causes, foremost among which are the Palestinian cause and the Western Sahara issue. Just two examples of the strength of the foundations on which the Algerian diplomacy has been based since the era of independence, a diplomacy that matured and grew amid the struggle against colonialism. Therefore, Algeria was and still is the voice that speaks the truth and defends oppressed peoples and those struggling for their freedom and independence.
You're still listening to Radio Algeria International. The Minister of Communication, Mohamed Mziane, has stressed that the President of the Republic had given the press corporation well-deserved support by providing it with a favorable environment to carry out its missions. Mariam Barshi.
The minister told the newspaper Shab in its edition entitled The Event and the Message that the 2020 Constitution enshrined the freedom of press as an unalienable and irreversible principle in addition to the well-deserved support provided by the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune. The aim is to strengthen its contribution to the promotion of professional practice, to keep pace with the dynamic of development, and to complete the edification of a strong, secure, prosperous, and victorious Algeria. He added that amid a complex international and regional context, a strong political will is emerging to promote the media sector through the strengthening of the sector's legal arsenal, which not only enshrines a professional, objective, and responsible press, but also reflects the determination of the country's high authorities to recover the place and role of the journalist within society, while creating the appropriate conditions to enable him or her to keep pace with the changes and challenges facing the world. On the occasion, the 63rd anniversary of the recovery of national sovereignty, the minister stressed that the national press has contributed to the process of independence of our beloved country, as well as the preservation of the national identity by confronting all attempts to target the country, its constants and its symbols. He added that it is now more necessary than ever to draw up a clear roadmap to promote the media landscape so as to enable it to adapt to international developments.
Algerians, like other Muslims around the world, are celebrating today the day of Ashura, which coincides with the 10th day of Muharram in the Hijri calendar. Masoud Sharfi tells us more about this day.
Ashura falls on the 10th day of the Muharram, the first month in the Islamic lunar calendar. It is a day of deep religious and historical significance for both Sunni and Shia Muslims, but is observed differently by each group. Ashura is a day of immense religious, spiritual, and historical importance in Islam. Sunni Muslims observe it mainly through fasting and remembering divine deliverance. Ashura is a paid holiday in most of the Muslim countries where it is celebrated. People fast on this day following the recommendations of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, who clearly said that fasting this day and the day before expiates the sins of the past year.
The OPEC Plus group has decided to increase oil production by 584 or 48,000 barrels per day in August in a step aimed at boosting the global oil supply. Mohammed Khatel.
This decision marks the first collective move by the group since the recent price spike, which was followed by a gradual decline due to easing geopolitical tensions. This decision represents an acceleration of the gradual increase that began in May, where previous agreements included monthly increases of about 411,000 barrels in May and June and 138,000 barrels in April. Oil expert Ali Barrow said the new increase is the highest this year, indicating the group's desire to support market stability and meet the rising global demand, especially with the summer travel season approaching.
I believe that the international economy is now suffering from many international crises. The economic crisis mainly in the United States as well as in Europe and in the Middle East. I believe that nowadays OPEC are trying to, even it's summer and now the consumption is high, they are trying to have better prices as their budget are linked. Some of the big producers, their budget is linked linked to the prices of the oil, higher prices than the existing prices. And I think that they are looking to increase the prices of the barrel as their economies are suffering as well.
The additional quantity will come from 8 member countries of the group, notably Algeria, Saudi Arabia, Russia, the UAE, Kuwait, Oman, Iraq, and Kazakhstan, as these countries have already begun to phase out the final stage of voluntary cuts, which amounted to 2.2 million barrels per day last April. It is worth mentioning that the OPEC Plus group, which accounts for about half of global oil production, has been reducing its output since 2022 in an effort to support prices. However, it has shifted in 2024 towards gradually changing its policy to regain market shares, especially after some members like Kazakhstan and Iraq exceeded agreed production levels. OPEC Plus confirmed in its statement that the decision to increase production is supported by stable global economic forecasts and a notable decline in global oil inventories, reinforcing the need to pump more crude to meet demand and ensure price stability, particularly in gasoline markets.
You also listen to Radio Algeria International and to the Middle East now, as both UNRWA and the World Food Programme called for an access to humanitarian aid and for lifting of the Israeli blockade on Gaza. The Israeli occupation army pursued its airstrikes on the territory, killing and wounding several Palestinians. According to the news agency Wafa, at least 17 people have been killed and several others wounded in Israeli attacks that targeted several areas of the Gaza Strip. Thousands of Palestinians, mainly women and children, have been killed or wounded since the Israeli occupying forces launched their attacks on the enclave nearly 2 years ago. In this respect, the World Food Programme once again called for the opening of corridors to allow for the funneling of humanitarian aid to the population in the northern, central and southern parts of Gaza. In a message posted on social networks, it called for a ceasefire and stressed the necessity to provide a vital to the most vulnerable while warning against a more and more serious humanitarian crisis. The World Food Programme underscores that a lasting ceasefire was urgent and would set the necessary conditions for safe, efficient and large-scale humanitarian aid to the needy. In a similar move, UNRWA's General Commissioner Filippo Lazzarini warned against an exacerbation of the sufferings of the inhabitants of Gaza confronted to a 4-month-long Israeli blockade. In a message posted on social networks, he recorded that the suffocating blockade had prevented the entry of fuel into the territory, facing water shortages. The head of UNRWA affirmed that an agreement must be reached to relieve the sufferings of the Palestinians who are confronted to humiliation. And now doctors in Gaza have warned that hundreds of babies are at risk of death amid a critical shortage of baby milk as the Israeli occupation continues to restrict the humanitarian aid that can enter the Strip. The head of pediatrics at Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis, Dr. Ahmed Al-Farah, said his ward had only about a week's worth of infant formula remaining. You still listen to Radio Algeria International, and massive demonstrations were held in several U.S. cities to denounce the Israeli genocidal aggression in Gaza. The news agency Wafa highlighted that during these demonstrations organized under the slogan Pro-Palestinian Demonstrations Near You, Stop the Genocide in Gaza, the protesters strongly condemned the escalation of the Israeli aggression against the Palestinian population in the Gaza Strip. They waved banners referencing the scale of the ongoing massacre targeting civilians, especially women and children. Rallies and sit-ins took place in the cities of San Francisco, Chicago, and Manhattan. Organizers called for an immediate arms embargo on the Israeli occupying authorities and an end to U.S. military support. You're still listening to Radio Algeria International, and in Lebanon, President Joseph Aoun called for more pressure to be exerted on the Israeli occupying authorities to force it to withdraw its forces from Lebanese territory and to provide the necessary guarantees to prevent further attacks on Lebanon. During a meeting with British Foreign Secretary, President Aoun expressed the hope that the British authorities would continue to support Lebanon in regional and international fora, especially at the United Nations Security Council, with with regard to the extension of the mandate of the UN interim force in Lebanon. President Aoun stated that the Lebanese army is deployed in the country except in those areas still occupied by the Israeli forces, notably the 5 Hills, undermining security and stability in the region. For his part, David Lammy affirmed that the UK and Lebanon share strong relations and reiterated his country's continuous support to Lebanon in all fields. You're still listening to Radio Algeria International. That's it for our news bulletin. I invite you now to listen to a program devoted to Ashura. It is compiled and presented by Saeed Bouazi.
Ashura is an Islamic holiday observed on the 10th of Muharram, the first month of the Islamic calendar year. The word Ashura means 10, denoting the date of the holiday. Traditionally, Ashura commemorates 2 events: the day Prophet Nuh, peace be upon him, left the ark, and the day Prophet Musa, peace be upon him, and his people was saved from Pharaoh and his army by Almighty Allah. Muslims regard fasting during Ashura as recommended, though not obligatory, having been superseded by the Ramadan fast. According to hadith record in Sahih al-Bukhari, Ashura was already known as a commemorative day during which some Mecca residents used to observe customary fasting. Prophet Muhammad, God's peace and blessings be upon him, fasted on the day of Ashura, the 10th of the Muslim month of Muharram in Mecca. When fasting during the month of Ramadan became obligatory, the fast of Ashura was made non-compulsory. During the time of Prophet Muhammad, God's peace and blessings be upon him, local Jews observed the day of fasting at this time of the year, their Day of Atonement. According to Jewish tradition, this marked the day that Prophet Musa, peace be upon him, and his followers were saved from the Egyptians when God parted the waters to create a path across the Red Sea to make escape possible. According to tradition, Prophet Muhammad, God's peace and blessings be upon him, learned of this tradition upon reaching Medina, and he found the tradition to be one worth following. He joined the fast for 2 days himself and encouraged followers to do so as well. Thus, a tradition began that remains to this day. Overall, Ashura is a rather quiet celebration, and for many it is not marked by outward display or public events at all. For Muslims, Ashura is a day marked by reflection, respect, and gratitude.
Hello and welcome to Radio Algeria International. Welcome to your program, Inspiring Figures. Aristotle was an ancient Greek philosopher and scientist who is still considered one of the greatest thinkers in politics, psychology, and ethics. When Aristotle turned 17, he enrolled in Plato's academy. In 338, he began tutoring Alexander the Great. In 335, Aristotle founded his own school in Athens. where he spent most of the rest of his life studying, teaching, and writing. Aristotle was born in circa 384 BC in Stagira, a small town on the northern coast of Greece that was once a seaport. Aristotle's father, Nicomachus, was court physician to the Macedonian king Amyntas II. Although Nicomachus died when Aristotle was just a young boy, Aristotle remained closely affiliated with and influenced by the Macedonian court for the rest of his life. Aristotle wrote an estimated 200 works, most in the form of notes and manuscript drafts, touching on reasoning, rhetoric, politics, ethics, science, and psychology. They consist of dialogues, records of scientific observations, and systematic works. His student, Theophrastus, reportedly looked after Aristotle's writings and later passed them to his own student, Neleus, who stored them in a vault to protect them from moisture until they were taken to Rome and used by scholars there. Of Aristotle's estimated 200 works, only 31 are still in circulation. Politics is a scientific study of writing and poetry where Aristotle observes, analyzes, and defines mostly tragedy and epic poetry. Compared to philosophy, which presents ideas, poetry is an imitative use of language, rhythm, and harmony that represents objects and events in the world. Aristotle posited. His book explores the foundation of story-making, including character development, plot, and storyline. In his book, Metaphysics, Aristotle clarified the distinction between matter and form. To Aristotle, matter was the physical substance of things, while form was the unique nature of a thing that gave it its identity. In his book, Politics, Aristotle examined human behavior in the context of society and government. Aristotle believed the purpose of government was to make it possible for citizens to achieve virtue and happiness. Intended to help guide statesmen and rulers, Politics explores, among other themes, how and why cities come into being, the roles of citizens and politicians, wealth and the class system, the purpose of the political system, types of governments and democracies, and the roles of slavery and women in the household and society. In rhetoric, Aristotle observes and analyzes public speaking with scientific rigor in order to teach readers how to become more effective speakers. Aristotle believed rhetoric was essential in politics and law and helped defend truth and justice. Good rhetoric, Aristotle believed, could educate people and encourage them to consider both sides of a debate. Aristotle's work explored how to conduct an argument and maximize its effect, as well as fallacious reasoning to avoid it. Aristotle composed works on astronomy, including on the heavens, and earth sciences, including meteorology. By meteorology, Aristotle didn't simply mean the study of weather. His more expansive definition of meteorology included all the affectations we may call common to air and water, and the kinds and parts of the earth and the affectations of its parts. In meteorology, Aristotle identified the water cycle and discussed topics ranging from natural disasters to astrological events. Although many of his views on the earth were controversial at the time, they were readopted and popularized during the late Middle Ages. In On the Soul, Aristotle examines human psychology. Aristotle's writings about how people perceive the world continue to underlie many principles of modern psychology. Aristotle's work on philosophy influenced ideas from late antiquity all the way through the Renaissance. One of the main focuses of Aristotle's philosophy was his systematic concept of logic. Aristotle's objective was to come up with a universal process of reasoning that would allow man to learn every conceivable thing about reality. The initial process involved describing objects based on their characteristics, states of being, and actions. Although Aristotle was not technically a scientist by today's definitions, science was among the subjects that he researched at length.